Boy, howdy, G. Willikers. Bracketology is a lot more fun than when you're a 2-seed instead of just living life on the bubble. We talk about all things MSU brackets with Joe Cook-Shugart of 131 Sports. Let's go.
You are Locked On Spartans, your daily podcast on the Michigan State Spartans, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Spartan friends, Spartan family, Locked On Spartans listeners, thank you all so much for tuning in to Locked On Spartans. It's your team in green and white 5 days a week right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Please rate, review, subscribe, comment below who you don't want to see in the NCAA tournament as we talk bracketology. Now, if you listen to the post-game show and made it long enough in that episode with Justin Thin after the Wisconsin game, I said that I actually don't want to face any team. I become a coward in the month of March, but we're going to get into all that with our guy Joe Cook-Shugart of 131 Sports, and then Jeremy Dewar of Spartans Illustrated talking that hockey here at the end of segment 2 and segment 3. Now, Joe, I'm going to just do like the meanest thing in the world right now because, yeah, you do great bracketology at 131 Sports. Like, we're going to get into that. You are also, not to out you less than 2 minutes into the show here, you are a Michigan alum. You are a Michigan fan. So the bully that I am, which, by the way, thanks for your time, your insight, appreciate that. Can you talk nice about Michigan State? As we go into the month of March here, like, what is the one thing that when you watch our Spartans, are you thinking like, crap, they do blank extraordinary right now?
Well, I mean, in terms of an actual particular thing that they do well, I'm going to have that be third. First, okay. My favorite thing about watching the Spartans is watching Cohen Carr dunk because he's superhuman. That one I appreciate just because of the sheer athleticism, allegiances aside. Number 2 is watching Jason Richardson's son. I don't know if you knew this, but Jace is Jason Richardson's son. I've heard. Little known fact. And just his ability to create off the bounce, to draw defenses in. There was a particular play when you all played Wisconsin towards the end of the game when he drove and he had 2 or 3 guys collapse on him and he got it to Cooper.
Kohler, I believe. Yeah.
Kohler. Okay, Kohler for an easy dunk. I mean, it doesn't matter. Any of your bigs, the way he can attract 2 or 3 guys and just you have one of your guys slip and it's just a thing of beauty when he's got the ball in his hands. That's what I appreciate about the players. What I appreciate about the team is, I don't know if I know you probably knowing your digging into the details of the team and just driving yourself crazy looking at data and what can this team do? You've seen modern shot charts. Modern shot charts are silly ridiculous because there's a lot of circles, 6 feet in, and then there's a lot of circles behind the 3-point line. Not a lot of mid-range Jays. So you got to be able to stop one of those 2 things. And the Spartans are absolutely elite at stopping 3-point shooting. And I'll go on Twitter and everybody, it doesn't matter what team they're a fan of after they play them. Oh, we had a bad 3-point shooting night. That's the only reason we didn't compete. I'm like, you had a bad 3-point shooting night because the Spartans run you off the line. They come over screens. They do the little things that Tom has taught them to do so that teams shoot poorly and can't shoot rhythm threes. It's not that the team had an off night. It's that they faced an elite 3-point defense, and I really appreciate that about Spartans.
God, I'm so glad you brought that up because, it has been 5 straight games now where after the game wraps up, it's, oh, my God, well, what an anomaly from this team. Well, I'm very far from a math guy, okay? My mom's a great math teacher. My brother, long lineage of math in this family, and I missed every single gene there. But correct me if I'm wrong. I think when something happens 5 times in a row, maybe it's just not an anomaly. Maybe that's actually a feature of this team. So I'm glad you mentioned that. God, there's so many good things to talk about here. And I appreciate you entertaining that. Again, as a Michigan fan, we're going to talk about your Wolverines here at the end of this conversation. We're going to sandwich it right now with some bracketology. Now, we don't get Joe on just because, he's this strapping gentleman and very nice with his time. No, he's also an ace bracketologist, guys. If you go to Bracket Matrix, consistently in the top 5 amongst the entire internet's collective of bracket minds. So, Joe, as you do daily, you updated your bracket, which thank you for doing this daily. We bracketologist fiends need this. I clicked on it. And look, like, I know I can't complain, right? Because like the last few years we've been crawling our way to the bubble. I've DM'd you many a times over the last few years with sweat coming down my forehead saying, Joe, how on earth can we lock up a bid this week? And those have been very uncomfortable conversations. We're squarely in it. Look to be locked in a 2 seed. How can I be upset? Well, here's how, Joe. 7 seed Kansas being opposite of Michigan State as the number 2 seed. And then let's say they get by Kansas. Well, who's the 1 seed? Oh, it's Auburn in the South region. First question about bracketology, Joe. Can you change that? Can you stop that? Stop that right now, please. Thanks.
I'm sorry, Matt. There's nothing. My hands are tied. Someone, I think you reached out to me on Twitter and asked me to do this already. But yeah, no, I'd have to. Let me get on the committee chair. Let me get him on the horn, and I'll get those principles changed right away, and we'll get this squared away so that you guys can play. I don't know, Tennessee or something.
Sure, we'll take it. Yeah, why not? Auburn just seems like a death sentence. So does Duke too. But that's where I kind of just immediately look when I look at bracketology. It's, hey, are we in the South region? And it's not just you, of course. Plenty of bracketologists out there have Michigan State in that South region, also in Cleveland to start this. So I guess, like, how does location work? Because you're not just one of those bracketologists that just line them up 1 through 68 and then just boop, boop, boop. No, you actually take the formula that the committee actually uses. So what does go into, location seeding for all these teams?
So the first thing that the committee does is they look at who the top 16 teams are. So the seeds 1 through 4, and the 1 through 4 line. Technically every team that's in play for the top overall seed, which really this year is Auburn and nobody else because Auburn's resume is completely ridiculous. Yeah. They will ask the teams that are in play for the number 1 overall seed for their preferred region and pod. When I say pod, I mean like the sub-regionals where the round of 64 and round of 32 are being played. So they're familiar with a team might, I don't know that this would ever come into play. A team hypothetically could request something that isn't the closest regional, but I would imagine in every instance, they're going to select the closest region and the closest pod. So what they're doing when they have the top 16 teams, they'll put in true seed order, they will take the number 1 overall seed. And they'll go Auburn. All right, let me look at the 4 regionals, the Midwest, the East, the South, and the West. And Atlanta, as shown in the NCAA actually has like a mileage calculator. So if you go out and you're real nerd, you can go to Google the NCAA mileage calculator, and you can put in a campus and a venue, and you can see how far away they are. So based on that mileage calculator, they will put in true seed order a team in the region that is the best geographic proximity to their campus. So that's why Auburn gets put in Atlanta as the number 1 overall seed. Then if you have Duke, well, if Duke would prefer Atlanta's already taken. So they get slotted into Newark in the East.
Gotcha.
And then so on and so forth. And you get down to Houston. Houston would then have left a choice between Indianapolis and San Francisco. They'll go to Indianapolis. And then who I have as the last 1 seed right now, Tennessee, defaults to San Francisco. Clearly that's their last choice, but
yeah, right.
And there is a precedence for the committee. If the worst 1 seed and the best 2 seed are close to one another, they could flip them to give teams more geographically viable locations. So you do that in true seed order. So per your complaint about playing Auburn, there's Indianapolis sure would be closer than for Michigan State. Well, here's the other rule that comes into play for selecting your region. The first 4 teams out of a given conference that are in those top 4 lines have to be put into different regions. So
okay, I see.
Auburn and Tennessee, as in my current bracket, are in the South and in the West. Well, Florida and Alabama are what right now I have is the 5 and 6 overall seed. They have to not be in the South and the West. So they would get put in the East and Midwest.
Gotcha.
So that leaves Michigan State with 2 options, Atlanta or San Francisco. And by default, they're going to say, okay, what's closest to East Lansing? Atlanta's closer than San Francisco. You guys get Auburn. Sorry.
Okay, so we just have to like SpongeBob SquarePants style this and push East Lansing like on the other side of the Mississippi River, closer to San Francisco. No problem. Okay, that's easy. I don't see why we just don't give that a whirl. Oh, okay. Cool.
Easy peasy.
Cool. Get the supplies you need from the site made for skilled trades Supply House. Whether you're in plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is the reliable way to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Plus, with the complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from 400-plus top brands, you will find exactly what you need delivered fast from coast to coast. Now, need help with an order? Supplies House offers expert support and industry-leading service. So you'll always talk to a real person. And for the trade pros looking for the extra edge, their free Trade Master program offers exclusive perks like dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Thousands of skilled professionals are already taking advantage, and now it's your turn. Join the Trade Master program today at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Plus, use promo code SH5 for 5% off your first order. That is supplyhouse.com.
The interesting bit is who's behind you. Wisconsin.
Yeah.
Hypothetically, this is where it's like,
oh no,
you don't want to cheer for your team to lose, right. But had Wisconsin beat you all, Wisconsin would be my 7th overall seed. You would be Michigan State would be my 8th overall seed. Wisconsin would prefer Atlanta, and then you all would actually end up in the West with Tennessee. So it was kind of like blessing and a curse. Yeah, you're going to very likely win the Big Ten regular season title, barring some, something that I haven't seen from my squad, and a complete change.
No.
We'll save that for the end. But that's the interesting bit. So that's how the regionals get determined. And they go through and they do all those. In the same order, then they assign teams to pods. So they would go Auburn, what's closest, you get Lexington, so on and so forth. So that's the nice thing about the positive about being the 7th overall seed, or just in general on the 2 line, is you're going to get Cleveland. You could almost just plan your travel arrangements around that, because the teams behind, even if Michigan State were to slip up, Wisconsin's the 8th overall seed. They're going to take Milwaukee over Cleveland. Who's next? St. John's is a high 3 seed. They're going to go to Providence over Cleveland. So, there's some room for error and still being in Cleveland as your pod, which, is essentially a home game, more or less, depending on what 7 or 10 you might draw if you can get past Central Connecticut State, which I have confidence they would do.
Hey, thanks. Appreciate that. So it looks like Michigan State is pigeonholed into this 2 seed. You go on Bracket Matrix. Every single bracketologist has Michigan State on the 2 line. Bart Torvik has MSU on the 1 line. FanDuel gives you 45-1 odds for MSU to make a 1 seed. So let's imagine that, they are this 2 seed. Very easy to imagine that. Like, what storyline matchup is the most inevitable here? Is it that Kansas round 2 game, the 2 blue bloods of Michigan State and Kansas, Bill Self versus Tom Izzo? Is it, a rematch with, I guess not a rematch, but is it a redemption revenge game for A.J. Hogarth's Vanderbilt Commodores to be a 7 or a 10 seed against Michigan State? Is it MSU versus St. Joe's in the Sweet 16 as a 2 versus 3 seed? Like, what's the most storyline made for TV matchup that seems the most inevitable here?
You nailed the 3 that are the. Those storylines.
Oh, I know how this works. Yeah, right.
All certainly have a at least a 5 or 10% chance of happening.
Right.
I'm hard pressed to pick what storyline I think is most likely. Vanderbilt has had a couple of good wins lately that has pushed them up to being a lot, especially with as strong as the SEC is, push them up to being significantly more likely to be on the 8-9 line. Okay. So that I would be shocked. I honestly, the way Vanderbilt's playing, and the scripts can flip on the like that. in college basketball. I do think that they would be more likely to get up to a 7 than they would be to fall back to a 10. But like anything's possible. But I do have them on that 8 in that 8-9 game right now. So I would say that one is probably the least likely. Kansas versus St. John's, in terms of likelihood, like if you look at where the preferred region of St. John's and the bracketing methodology that they use, St. John's is probably, like they would prefer to be in the East. But depending on how they slot in the 3 line, they could very well be in the South with Michigan State, assuming Michigan State ends up there. Yeah. I'd put that around, 15%. I think Kansas is, I guess now that I'm talking my way through this, I think Kansas is probably the most likely, especially with their loss last night to Houston. Right. I think that they're pretty firmly on the 7 line. Honestly, their resume is more like an 8-9 resume, but because they were number 1 to start the season, they've still got that kind of preseason bias. They're a blue blood, so they've got that name recognition. Like they've got, the estranged former Wolverine that I begrudgingly cheered for when he was on the team, and now I'm free to hate, and that's great. And
join the party. It's great.
Yeah, right. Have him wear another ski mask. Good gravy.
I love that. That was the best.
Yeah, it made him so easy to hate. But at any rate, I do think Kansas, especially Lawrence isn't it's not a far drive to Cleveland. Looking at Kansas could just as easily, looking at the what I have as the other regionals, Kansas could end up in the other Cleveland pod, because right now Florida would end up being in Cleveland because all of their preferred pods are going to be taken up by the other SEC teams. Gotcha. So Kansas could just as if you look at my bracket from today, Kansas could just as easily flip with Memphis. If West Virginia would have to come along because they wouldn't want 2 Big 12 teams playing one another, but you could take Kansas and Georgia and Memphis and West Virginia and just flip them. And honestly, I don't know if the storylines there, and it would be, I'm sure Spartan fans everywhere there's nothing they would love more than sending Hunter Dickinson home to, go work as with Jack Goki from Oakland, working as a middle manager.
Yes.
He's 25, 30 years old now at this point. So
correct.
Let's get him out of here.
Yeah. That'd be great, but that'd be the most nerve-wracking game of all time, because as fun as that would be, it would also hurt as equally on the other end. Look, we'll get you out the door here with this, and I feel like it's just a real weird atmosphere around Michigan basketball, because you guys still control your own destiny for a banner, right? Like, you guys have won these outstanding games in the last month. It's been well documented that you guys win very, very close games, but when it doesn't go great, like against Purdue, Illinois, Michigan State, it could be a double-digit defeat. How on earth are you feeling these last 2 games? Do you kind of scoff at the idea that you guys control your own destiny? Just take me in the mind of a Michigan basketball fan right now, because I feel like, record be damned, a Big Ten banner still in sights be damned. The vibes are still a little harsh right now. Correct me if I'm wrong there, Joe.
No, I mean, anybody that's watched this team, Michigan fan or not, the past month knows that they've been playing with fire. I know you said you're not a big math guy. I'm an actuary. I am a huge math guy. Okay. I saw the writing on the wall. All of the predictive analytics said, you look at efficiencies and stuff, and this is what the Wolverines were doing was not sustainable. Yeah, they're winning games, and that's what matters at the end of the day. But at a certain point, hitting a buzzer beater to beat Rutgers at home is just not gratifying. Getting housed by Illinois, however many straight 8-9, Brad Underwood has owned U of M since he's been there, since the previous coaching regime of Juwan Howard. That is about that. So that's where, and I've seen people say, "Oh, that's an incredible cope." I'm like, okay, you can call it whatever you want to call it that. This year has been a success especially coming off last year.
No doubt.
Every year under Howard got progressively worse. The fact that they didn't get a Final Four banner when they got a dream scenario of getting to play UCLA, and they were right there. And it's, like going from that and just progressively getting worse and being literally the worst team in the Big Ten last year, just to be in having 2 games left and saying we control our own destiny to get at least a shared banner. Granted, even in that scenario, assuming that you all take care of business against Iowa Thursday night, Michigan State would, I think pretty much every tiebreaker scenario would end up with translating down to Purdue, who you guys only played once and would have beat, and then Michigan would have split with them, so you guys would get the 1 overall seed. So right. It's one of those like backhanded, if we somehow beat Maryland, and even more in a more preposterous fashion, if Michigan were to stun me and everyone else and win at the Brez to split that, have the same record. It's one of those, you get that banner, but who won the tiebreaker? It's kind of those,
I get it.
It's kind of, it's the whole, whatever, the Michigan State Notre Dame game where I think they tied 10-10 in football and someone described it as kissing your sister. Right. That it's that whole vibe. I think they've gotten a little bit exposed in the past month as, you look at their resume and you look at the quality of the team and you're like, this is probably the quality of a 6, 7, 8 seed. And they're going to end up in all likelihood as a 4 or 5 seed. They're going to have outpaced it. So lucky, they'll be favored in their first round game. But a month ago, I would have been like, all right, this team is Final Four caliber. And now I'm like, I'll be shocked if we make the second weekend.
Gotcha.
My kind of barometer this year is, especially coming off of last year, make the tournament, win a game. That's a success. Move on to year 2. I will ratchet up those expectations in years 2 and 3.
Folks, we're going to be back here with another guest. That's right, double guest day on Locked On Spartans. Jeremy Dewar of Spartans Illustrated here to talk that hockey. But Joe, hey, thanks a lot, man. Much appreciated. Guys, onethorunsports.com. But all right, let's talk that hockey now. For the first time in a long time here, sorry about that, guys, we're about to talk Michigan State hockey with the one, the only Jeremy Dewar of Spartans Illustrated. And Jeremy, did you have an okay weekend? I would imagine the answer is going to be a yes here.
Yeah. I think it was, for the first and only time I will ever do this, thank you, Penn State hockey. Yes. You gave me as good of a weekend as I could handle by beating Minnesota Friday night, and then Saturday was just a dream. It was perfect.
That was an awesome game on Big Ten Network on Friday. And, of course, not talk about the Michigan State game, but, that Penn State overtime winner against Minnesota was electric, set up perfectly for our Spartans to get 2 wins out of South Bend to clinch another Big Ten banner. But before we talk about, what happened on the ice, what's going to happen on the ice the rest of March, something more pressing we have to get to here, because there was a tweet from a man who has been through the dark days of the Tom Anastas and Danton Cole era. Okay, this man is Michigan State hockey through and through. And, of course, we're talking one Jeremy Dewar right now. The tweet read, folks, it's my wife's birthday and I'm taking her out for dinner at Puck Drop tomorrow. LOL. Never in the history of the internet has LOL had less meaning than that. I don't think any laughs were shared. But Jeremy, taking your wife out to a birthday dinner on the Puck Drop of a Big Ten clincher, how did that night go for you? Did you have the phone on top of the table, under the table? What happened here?
So we had a little bit of a life change too. So we ended up staying home and making dinner, but still missed about a period and a half.
Okay.
Did have the phone on the lap under the table there though. And I, being the sicko that I am, for a long time, I've had MSU hockey tweets sent to notifications. So I just kind of watched the little preview come in. So I did not stream it, did not anything like that, but I did know that we were up 2-0 by the time I turned the game on. Or actually, sorry, 2-1, because I did miss they had a quick goal. So
here we are. Another banner being hung up in the rafters. What is different, though, about this year's team than last year's team? Because it was a celebration on the ice, too. Last year was much more celebratory. This year is more of like, handshakes, job's not finished. Aside from the mentality, though, on the ice, what is different from this year's team than last year's team?
This team is definitely more up and down the lineup loaded. I mean, they ended up finishing the country 5th in goals scored, and it just much more consistent, I think, than last year's team. Last year's team, it took a couple months to get going. Like it kind of felt like a dream because it took a hot run at the end to actually make it happen. Like you had, you had a little bit of a slow start. Trey Augustine had to get his wheels under him, as the youngest player in college hockey is understandable. So last year's felt like a huge wave to get there, because not only because of where the program had been, but even within the season itself, it took a hot finish to get there. This one just felt much more like, to be honest, like they were in control of their own destiny, and then they had the slip up last weekend, and you're like, oh no, this is just unfortunate that they're in a conference where Minnesota is also red hot too, right? So much more consistent in depth up and down the lineup this year than last year. And Trey Augustine has just been himself the whole season versus a partial run, coming off the World Juniors like he did last year.
So hindsight's 2020, of course. In Michigan State, they accomplished their goal of lifting the banner. So it's not a bad thing right now. But just like you mentioned, like there was a little stumble down the stretch here. They in the last 4 games going into South Bend, they had 1 win, 2 losses, then a shootout loss to Penn State. Did it feel like things were kind of falling apart, or that there was a trend that you didn't like that was happening on the ice, or do you just chalk it up to, hey, that's life in the Big Ten against some really good teams in Michigan and Penn State?
Yeah, I mean, I think I chalk it more up to that's just life in the Big Ten. Like it's going to catch up to you. Like, I mean, this conference is just so loaded, and I think it's the hardest conference to win, not just because of the talent on the teams, but because you play everyone 4 times. So, you catch Penn State as they're getting hot, and as their transfer goalie is just unreal. So you end up getting 1 out of 5 or 1 out of 6 points against them. But there are some things that were concerning. Like they've had some slow starts, which I guess we're used to in Michigan State fandom across multiple sports. Yeah, I mean they've had some slow starts, and even this weekend they did better about that and jumped out to leads. But they have had some slow starts and some things that were a little bit concerning. But when you step away, you're also like, well, these are concerning in the first world problems way of we're not playing the way that we are. But if you look at around the country, as we head into conference tournaments, there's about 3 teams I think could win a national title. The hard part for MSU is another one of those teams is in their conference. So you gotta deal with that. But no, I mean I think they played much better against Notre Dame, got back to the things that they need to do. Now you just got to carry that over with a week off next week to hosting a game in the Big Ten tournament. So
I'm glad you brought up the national title and specifically the tiers of teams, because to make a cross-sport reference, in basketball it really seems like it's Auburn and Duke, and then good luck to the other 66 teams in the field here. For NCAA hockey, is there a real top-heavy tier like there's for basketball? Is Michigan State squarely in that, or just give us your number 1 tier and how far away they are from everyone else, you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think that top tier is Boston College, Michigan State, and Minnesota. I think those 3 have really separated themselves this year. And then I think it breaks off from there. A little bit of an asterisk is that Denver is lurking there. Denver, I would have had them preseason start there. They just haven't done it this year. But I mean, that's a team with guys who have won multiple national titles on that roster. So they're not going to be nervous come that NCAA tournament. So I think it's those 3 that have really broken away from everybody else. But it's a single elimination tournament in a really weird sport. So it doesn't take much to find someone besides those 3 winning. But I think you have to have those 3 on their own tier going into the tournament.
And you have the hot offense, like you've mentioned. Trey Augustine has been a stone wall in the net. What do you think is going to be the biggest thing, though, for this team moving forward? What's the number 1 reason why they can do something fun here in the month of March?
It's that depth. It's just that depth. You look at last weekend, Isaac Howard, who's the Hobie Baker favorite, or not favorite, but a contender, and one of the points leaders in the country, has 1 empty net goal. And that's he chipped in some assists, but he wasn't the one that was scoring. You had Friday night 3 defensemen score. Some fluky goals in there too, but just like, you had 3 defensemen scoring, then you come back Saturday night and more defensemen are scoring. Tanner Kelly scored a goal. Tiernan Shouty now I think has 8 goals. And that's your third line right there. So I think for them, no team is going to have 4 lines that roll with them. Again, outside of that top tier of BC and Minnesota, but even BC at this point has had a lot of injuries, so they're a situation where their top 2 lines are definitely probably more vaunted than MSU's. But if you get into a game where it's tired legs in the third period, MSU is going to be more fresh because they're just rolling 4 lines. Again, if you're an MSU basketball fan, it should be feel very, very similar, right? To we've seen basketball do that, where they take games over in the last 10 minutes and just kind of lock teams down. That's how the hockey team can get rolling too, is they can really lock it in for a late 10-minute stretch there. If you play a team that's only rolling their top 2 lines consistently, you're going to wear them out.
I don't know what you're talking about with the fluky goals. I thought when it banked off the Irishman's skate right into the net, that's just raw skill, Jeremy. Come on, man.
Yeah, that's just Matt Baskell just really knows geometry. He knows how the boards are going to bounce right back into the goalie. That was all planned. Planned. He's from Chicago. He knows Notre Dame. That's the whole thing.
The speed of the game just slows down for him. He knew that skate was going to be right there, right in the nick of time. It was great.
You don't get a Muskox flannel NIL without knowing these things.
Right, correct. Speaking of the depth here, and this is something we really haven't talked about on the show, but the last month they've been without senior captain Red Savage. Obviously a good player on the ice, leader of this team. Amongst the depth, is there one player that's really, stepped up in that role to plug in that hole? Is it just a by committee, or who should get some shine in the absence of Savage here?
Yeah, I don't know if anyone has stepped into the straight Red Savage role. That's been a tough one because he's such a versatile player. He's a center and he plays special teams and he does so much. But I think at least as far as offensive contribution, you've seen, I mentioned before, Tiernan Shouty and Tanner Kelly have kind of stepped up with their goal contributions the last few weeks. A guy that he hasn't done it these last few weeks, but Gavin O'Connell could be someone that could really step into that role. He's someone that I think has had a little bit of a tougher sophomore year. He had an injury himself where he missed the middle stretch of the season, and maybe he's starting to feel back to normal and it could get back to what he was freshman year a little bit. And same with Carson Dorwart. He's started to chip in some goals, but the same thing. He didn't start the year healthy. He started the year injured, and he's kind of seemed to be catching up this whole time. So, and again, this week off and having a bye week recently as well, maybe he's a guy as we get into tournament play, I could see as teams focus on Isaac Howard, that just opens up more opportunities for these guys down the lineup.
Now I'm going to let my basketball brain bleed into this right here as it comes to sweating out bracketology. And amongst that is the location of which you play in. I don't want to see Michigan State go out to San Francisco for the region of basketball. But for hockey, there's a nice little region about an hour south of where, hey, this is being recorded right now outside of Metro Detroit. I would like to see this team in Toledo. Do you know, if it's a lock that they're going to be in Toledo? Are you sweating this as much as we are, hoping that they are in Toledo and these will be de facto home games? Or just take us into the hockey mind of Jeremy Dewar with hockey bracketology?
Yeah, hockey bracketology is weird too, but at this point, they've basically 100% locked in the second overall seed.
Okay.
They probably, I don't think there's any way they could ever jump BC. There's just not enough games to do it. But BC, irregardless, even if they jump BC, it wouldn't change because there are regionals out east that they're going to try and keep BC in, and the MSU regional is going to end up being Toledo. So I've told some people to pull the trigger on tickets. I think it's a done deal because the way the regionals break out, even again, if Minnesota were to jump Michigan State, there's a regional in Fargo that it makes sense to put Minnesota. So even if Michigan State slipped to the third overall, number one, it would still make sense to put them in Toledo. So that's how I feel it's gonna break out. Again, there could be some fluctuation on who they play in that region, but as far as the location, since these 3 teams have really pulled themselves away from everybody else in the pairwise, they all are going to be a top seed and they all have a region that makes sense for them. I think BC is Manchester, New Hampshire, so we're gonna have it pretty easily locked up, and I feel very confident in Toledo. being the region for the Spartans.
I like what you said about the tickets there, because I did look. If I'm not gonna let this be a Locked On Spartans jinx, if, knock on wood, they make it that far to that Saturday game where a win would mean a Frozen Four. I just looked up tickets right now, like $25. So get in while the getting's good, before like other Spartan fans realize, oh my God, they're playing an hour south for a Frozen Four bid, and then they're 3-4 times the cost of what they were. So get in that early, guys.
A historic barn that was on AP Bio, so it's a fantastic barn there. You got to get down there and see it. So
what more do you need in life? Let's go, guys. Come on. All right, guys. That's Jeremy Dewar, over Spartans Illustrated. Anything you want to plug here before we let you go and enjoy the rest of your week here? What a time to be a Spartan. My God, this is great.
Yeah. I'd say hockey's going to be weird. It takes a back seat to basketball this week. Like I said, they're off this week. So we'll just kind of sit around and watch who we get, whether it's Wisconsin, Penn State, or Michigan, coming to East Lansing a week from this Saturday. So, more, just follow along on Twitter. I'll kind of update people on who it looks like we're getting. Maybe we'll get Michigan back in East Lansing again. So
let's go, baby. Let's go. All right, guys, we will be back tomorrow. You already know it. It's Locked On Spartans. We do this 5 days a week, or, we've been doing 6 days recently. That's how hot it's been in the streets here of East Lansing. But guys, until then, take care of yourselves. Love you all. Go Green.